Tom Klaus here from Tenacious Change. Over the next 30 minutes, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Durryle Brooks about love, justice, and the intersection of those two concepts. Durryle Brooks is an interdisciplinary research scholar, practitioner, and a social justice educator in his hometown of Baltimore, Maryland. Durryle's educational journey has taken him from Baltimore to St. Mary's College of Maryland, the San Francisco State University, and the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Along the way, he has earned degrees in religion, sexuality studies, and finally, his doctorate in education. After completing his doctorate, he became the founder and CEO of Love and Justice Consulting, LLC in Baltimore. Love and Justice Consulting is an organization that provides leaders with diversity and social justice learning opportunities to increase their capacity to effectively and authentically engage difference. Durryle has published articles on the work of love in peer-reviewed journals, and he is currently writing a book on the subject. In the description below this video, you will find links to some of his writing and a couple of videos on the topic of what is love. Personally, I've been really excited about having this conversation with Durryle Brooks because it's an opportunity to reconnect with him. You see, Durryle and I worked together at an organization in Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago. He impressed me then as a bright, engaging young man with infinite potential. He impresses me today as a man who has thoughtfully leveraged those qualities and has achieved much of that potential. But I don't think he's done yet. I think you will see what I mean as you watch and listen to the conversation Durryle and I had on the work of love. He's onto something here that made me reflect and think carefully about how I do the work of love. I think it will cause you to reflect and think more deeply as well. All right, now, let's go to my conversation with Durryle Brooks on the work of love. Well, Durryle, thank you so much for joining me today for this time of conversation and a chance to really kind of catch up. So let's be fully transparent, all right? And just say that we've known each other for a few years. In fact, we worked together in downtown DC with a global advocacy organization. You watched me suffer through my PhD program, and I was there to watch you begin your PhD program. And so we have been brothers in arms in marching through the joy and occasional misery of doing a PhD program. But I am so delighted to see you here. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to talk with you. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's really exciting to be here, to be in conversation about both sort of the long journey that we've had together, near and far. And it's really, really great to have an opportunity just to kind of connect around things that matter. I think conversations that matter, that are important, I think, especially right now in our world. And so I'm really grateful for you for inviting me to this discussion.
Thanks, Durryle. Before we get into a conversation about the work of love, what do you think it's important for us to know about Durryle Brooks?
Well, Tom, I think one of the most important things to know about me is that I have this really deep desire for everyone to have access to their full untapped potential. And I believe it is because I have that as a value that the conversation about love, particularly in the context of these broader social systems of oppression and how they limit us in many ways, really gets me antsy, excited, frustrated. And I do all of this work from a place of wonder, curiosity, in order to help us think intentionally about how we trouble these notions, these norms, these societal expectations that sort of say the world is only this particular way or that way, and to really create space for folks who, like me, have multiple historically marginalized identities. And so to be clear that I operate from a place that this world and the system and the structures and particularly in the United States, were not set up for me, and they were not designed to love and appreciate and value me. And so all of my work now is figuring out how do we create space, opportunity for other folks who have those multiple identities to claim their power, and then how do we create systems and structures to help affirm and pour into and uplift those people. So that's kind of my orientation to this work.
Well, it sounds like we are maybe getting already into the very first question I wanted to ask you, which is this one, Durryle. What do you mean by the work of love?
So Tom, for me, doing the work of love is about interrogating the ways in which society has perpetuated a particular belief about what love is. And I talk about that as a normative understanding of love, which is usually discussed in the context of romance, fairy tales, whimsical, excuse me, like this very fanciful idea of love. And I say that's what the normative expectation is. But when I have to start layering in a systemic analysis and a sort of an anti-racism and an anti-homophobic and an anti-everything, when it begins to ask me questions, love, in that blanket narrative about what love is, there are particular messages around who is to be loved, who gets to access love, and ultimately who's valuable. And then if I do that, I get to say, usually operating in the places of privilege. So heterosexual, white narratives, middle class, able-bodied folks who get to have access to what I call the normative idea of love, that I, as a Black queer man, just because of living and being socialized in this country, was force-fed from the very early days. And so the work for me and folks like me, and everybody really, is to undo that, to trouble it, to interrogate it, so that we can create real, meaningful, individual, but also collective understandings of what love is, so that we can all show up in ways where we're valuing one another, ourselves, when we're in systems, and that those systems are designed in ways to elevate just the core of who and what we are as beautiful human beings, not irrespective of our identities, but because of the difference in our identities that we enter those spaces. So I think that's how, what doing the work of love is really about.
I really like origin stories. And so I hear you talk about that, and it makes me wonder, how did that come about? What's the origin of this understanding of what love is and the work of love? Can you speak a little bit into that, Durryle?
Yeah, Tom, that's a great question. And I think as I sit on it, there are many different cuts to this. But I think one of the primary places is that I came to this work of love really after witnessing harm being done to people who had professed to sort of love and give care and to do social justice oriented work. And so there was a disconnect between sort of this mission to eradicate racism or eradicate homophobia as an outwardly facing thing, but in their classrooms or in their homes were using similar violent tactics to make people feel small and to feel less than. And so for me, my first deep dive into sort of the interrogation of love actually started at St. Mary's College of Maryland, when my St. Mary's project was investigating Dr. King's philosophical framing of love in order to activate activists in the South and to motivate folks, some of which Christian folks who did not who had refused to do the kind of work that will require justice on behalf of our community. And so I entered this already sort of asking questions about what did Dr. King have to believe to be true about our community and about justice and about love in order to sort of spur social change, social activism, and social transformation work. And so that is one part of the origin story. And I could tell you many more pieces of that. But for me, Dr. King, by his embodiment, I was able to already start making connections between a love that had to be beyond an individual understanding in order to sort of do some of the more structural change work.
Let's go ahead and connect the concept of the work of love with social justice, because you certainly raised that in describing the origin work that you began at St. Mary's College. And so, can you help us understand that connection a little bit more clearly? How does the work of love connect with social justice and even movement building related to social justice? I mean, how do those all intersect?
Yeah, Tom, I think that's a great question. And for me, how I begin to sort of thread this needle is that when I sort of started to understand both Dr. King's thrust, his particular philosophy, when I started to examine the Me Too movement, when I started to examine the Fight for 15 and Time's Up and the movement for Black Lives, I was trying to begin to really theorize the demonstrations, right? That people were literally risking their lives, that the media was coding as riots. And in reality, they were uprisings, depending on who you were talking to, that sort of gave birth out of years of systemic exploitation, marginalization, and oppression. And so from my perspective, the thrust between, or rather the link between love and the Fight for 15 or the movement for Black Lives was that people were literally putting their lives on the line to restructure, to demand a restructuring of society that would allow people to live more healthy, long-term, fulfilling, and equitable lives. And so when I think about the movement of justice work, at the end of the day, all of them want people to be free, to have access to enough resources, to live their best life. And so through the literal use of our bodies to demand the change for systems, to demand the change for our policing structure in this country, all of those activities were people risking something. And for me, one of the pillars of love is that you have to begin to risk something if you really care about it. And you have to care about it so much that you would make a sacrifice of your time, energy, resources, and labor. And so from my perspective, what those folks were doing out there in the streets and the protests, and folks who are doing policy work and advocacy and organizing, all of them are risking their literal livelihood, their life force, to demand the recognition and dignity of everybody. And at the end of the day, no matter what movement, social justice movement you're in, that's the core value. That's the underpinning value. And so that's how I arrive at the connection between love and justice. So that when you reclaim and sort of reconceptualize love in a way that is beyond the individual, romantic, and familial to the collective, you get to understand why someone, a Black mother, for example, would get out on the streets after George Floyd was murdered by that police officer, even when she's probably working multiple jobs, taking care of other little ones, and doing that, just the business of living. And so for me, that is what real love is, that sacrifice and the demand for the dignity of everybody.
As I was preparing for this conversation with you, Durryle, I was reading an article that you wrote, I think in 2017. And there was a citation that you used in that. And I don't remember where the citation came from, but I remember, I believe pretty clearly what it said. It said, love is what justice looks like in public. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And it sounds to me that what you're talking about is that when that love that's not familial, that love that is not conventional, that love that is not romantic, when it is being operationalized, it's operationalized as justice in public. Am I getting that right?
Yes, Tom. And so that, I believe that quote was from Dr. Cornel West. And this idea that, and what I want to sort of be clear about, it's not that familial love and romance are not important and core central aspects of doing love work, because all of them require us to do justice in those intimate spaces. The problem with the normative idea of love is that it tries to bind it only to those areas, to leave out that radical impulse to change systems on behalf of those that you love. And so it is through this idea of what I'm trying to offer is it's the expansion of our normative. It's a pushing back, it's the redefining in order to be able to honor the fact that we are individuals living in communities and systems, having sorts of relationships, all different kinds, and that when you really love someone, you'd ask for things to be different in order for them to be nourished, whole, and complete. And I think for me, that's the thrust of a real love in action every single day, no matter whether it's in your intimate relationships, with your parents, with your little ones, or on this broader social political context where you're demanding the rights for Black, gay, bisexual, transgender, differently abled, like whatever it is that you're doing that work to say, I'm going to restructure society for their behalf.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's not an either or. It's not the work of love as you have defined it and connecting love with justice, or the romantic or familial or other types of love. It is an extension of those. And you know, in just this last thing that you said, Durryle, that really stood out to me is it took me back to a text from the Christian scriptures that effectively says, you know, what love is that you are willing to lay your life down for somebody. You know, and that's an aspect of love that's really hard. I mean, I might be willing to lay my life down for one or two people in my life, you know, but wow. I mean, am I able to lay my life down for a cause or something that I believe so passionately about, and you know, when it's about an injustice that is affecting a greater number of people? I mean, that is a capacity. It strikes me that is a capacity for love that is extraordinary, not just a little. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, Tom, I think the call, the decree, you know, I also was raised Christian, African Methodist Episcopal, so I'm not surprised that even in how I was able to construct it, really also thinking about Dr. King's work, that there are strong Judeo-Christian beliefs underneath of that work, and particularly one, because I think it was actually really great. Like it's this idea that that in order for us to really show up for one another, it's going to require us to give. And it's going to require us to give in ways that are sometimes uncomfortable, in ways that we are sometimes not even aware that we have additional resources, and not just material, but like internal sort of resources and capacity. But what I also think it really means for me is that a part of this writing of that article, of the book that I'm working on as a more further explanation of this, is that I'm trying to get us to think and dream bigger than our current idea of what love is, so that more people can possibly lean into the possible. And so, you know, that whole idea around, you know, if you're you know, setting the bar low and, you know, people will just come and normalize that will be the norm. Beyond this is like, I'm asking people to lean in and ask yourself questions. Why won't you go out and demonstrate on behalf of Black Lives Matter, or the murders of the many API women in Atlanta? What's keeping you in your seat? What's keeping you from doing that? And if that is a part attached to how you conceptualize love, I think that could be a part of it. because your love isn't big enough to hold the most immediate things, your most trusted family, your whole trusted friends, for a bigger cause. And so for me, that's why I also problematize the notion, because it allows us to get sleepy and only think that love that I'm willing to sacrifice for is the love where people treat me right, or for my children, or within my local community, in a very tiny way. But it goes beyond that. The type of love that I think we need to see widespread system change is going to require us to lean in to that justice, community, collective liberation. And I think love is a pathway for us to do that if we begin to challenge the limitations that the normative notions of love have put on us.
Durryle, I had no idea you were a heart surgeon. Because it strikes me that what you're doing is that you're trying to increase the size of the hearts of people. I mean, wow. I mean, is there any greater mission in this world than to increase the capacity of love and the size of a person's heart, to take it beyond just themselves, their family, their neighborhood, their community, to the wider world. Wow. I mean, that just hit me as you were talking about that. I thought, yeah, and it's not comfortable to have your heart get that big, but it's also important. It's really important. What is it that you want people, if you're sitting just chatting with somebody, or imagine that person is, whoa, what a surprise, me at this moment, what is it that you want people to understand deeply about the work of love?
So Tom, I think that question about what I want people to know is attached to what you described. It is that I've lived most of my life thinking that I only had enough room in my heart for a few things. And when I realized that every time I've challenged, that I've accepted a new challenge, a new relationship, that my heart can continue to expand and grow. And that as that process, that actually, if you're real, in my mind, if what I want people to know is that your heart can expand so much more than what we've given it credit for, or we think it is, or how we limit it or bind it. Because at the end of the day, it is not something, it is not a scarcity of a resource. It is something that is a well that is attached to a source that is deep within you, that will keep replenishing itself if you take care of it. And if in the expansion of it, you will sort of begin to refill yourself, and you'll see yourself grow and change and transform. And I think I want people to believe that transformation is possible, that healing is possible through the expanding of our hearts, the eradication of those negative, toxic norms, the way in which we might have internalized systemic beliefs of inferiority, or that we're less than. And it's the expelling of that. And it's in the doing. And so this is based on my dissertation research, which was community activists, organizers, activists, all Black queer folks doing cultural liberation work. And so there was a way in which, in the doing of creating spaces for people to find unapologetic wholeness and completeness, that they were also liberating themselves and expanding their area and being able to see themselves healed through the doing and the creating. And I think for me, that's one of the things in where I expanded my own understanding, because at that time I was really angry and I was like, I don't even want to touch this. But I learned so much from those interviews that it even sort of made my heart grow.
I'm thinking that you just answered the other question I was going to ask, which is how are you hoping your work on the work of love is going to impact people? And what I'm hearing you say is that not only when we engage in the work of love is it transformative to our world, as we allow it to lead us into the kind of activity that exudes this love and justice towards others, but that as our own heart expands, that it also brings about a sense of wholeness and healing to us as well.
Yes, Tom, absolutely. And that there's a beauty, it's a kind of giving of oneself that is restorative. And what I want people to be clear of, especially our activists and organizers who sometimes think that I just need to keep giving and giving and giving in ways that are actually detrimental, right? And say like, I give so much that I can't even take care of myself. And so a part of this work is also the invitation to figure out what's the motivating factor for you to be doing the justice-oriented work anyway? Is it sustainable the way in which you're doing it? And then how do you know, because a part of the work of love is the individual, as you named earlier. And so what are you doing to love on, heal on, and restore yourself as an expression of a larger structural, a justice-oriented strategy to stay in for the long haul? Because the reality is that systems of an oppression, there are overt ways in which it takes us out of this world, and there are covert ways. And sometimes it is the covert, it is the stress, it is the hypertension, it is the not eating, it is the not sleeping at night for a bigger cause that we're thinking by the sacrificing of our body in that way, that it is somehow going to create the types of experiences to create a different type of world. And so people might talk about that as like just a martyrdom. Like we want to be a martyr. But this idea of love and reconceptualizing it, it also invites us to find it and make it within ourselves, for ourselves, so that we can actually be lowering our blood pressure as an intentional strategy to resist erasure and dehumanization in this broader system that will have us working 24/7, 365 under the demands of capitalism, exploiting us, and then drying, and once our bodies fail, discarding us, some of which might not have insurance, and then out here alone and destitute. And so I think it's both structural and individual, and it's intimate and collective, and it's how we begin to thread and link our understanding of a long-term strategy for the radical reimagining of our society to the joy, pleasure, longevity of one's own being as a form of resistance and reimagining.
So I had this interesting aha, I think, as you were talking, that I don't know that I had really connected this. I mean, we were talking before we started the interview that the space that I do a lot of work in right now is organizational change and community change. And the aha I had, I just want to check this out with you, is that community change work is many times, if not always, social justice work. Because a lot of times the changes that have to be brought about in communities are about equity, about diversity, about inclusion, about leveling the playing field for everybody, and providing access and opportunity to people who might not typically have access and opportunity. That was a bit of an aha for me, but I want to check that with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Tom, it does make sense to me. I think so much of my work, we were at an organization doing reproductive health work. And so my work around community change was about the inclusion and recognition of LGBT folks. And so the community change that needed to happen was pushing back against heteronormativity, its assumption that everybody was heterosexual, in order to get that particular community the kinds of resources, access to HIV medication for the ones who were positive, contraceptive access for the folks who needed it. Like all of that was a change in these larger structures to create more effective, healthy thriving people, communities who've been historically marginalized. And for me, in my change thinking and thinking about change work, social change work, is that that's what it is. It is about reimagining structures that have been created with some people clearly not in mind. And in some cases, explicitly trying to marginalize when I think about and exploit when I think about Black folks in this country, right? These systems have been structured as ways to further exploit. And so my role and how I see my role is thinking about all of the many creative ways to sort of get that system thrown out, reimagined, based on the needs of those who are most impacted by it.
And you know what? I cannot think of a better place to begin than doing the work of love and doing that internally, expanding your own heart, and then taking that into the world in which we live. So I love what you're doing, Durryle. It's important. It is so important for this world and in this particular time in which we live, in which it seems like there's a horrific shortage of love. I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. Is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't asked you?
So Tom, I am so excited for the opportunity to be here and spend time and reflect. It always helps me grow, refine, as I continue to do my own work. And so I just kind of want to name that as a continual process. And I think you had really great questions, right? I think you hit on a couple of the things that I would have imagined. I think what I would share and offer is just that piece that I just named, which was that this is a journey. It is lifelong. It is a constant renewing of our own selves, our own beliefs, our own communities, our own systems, and that being in a way to think about how does one live a life of meaning and purpose, doing justice-oriented work that doesn't require them to sacrifice the very core and who of what they are, but to find joy, and some folks like Adrienne Marie Brown with it, pleasure and activism. There's pleasure. There's let the joy be the resistance. Let the love be the resistance that allows us to sustain. Let us pull from that well of unlimited, untapped energy in order to demand that systems treat everybody with dignity and respect. And that goes for even treating everyone within your families, because there's a whole lot of stuff that we don't do in our own families, because I think our ideas of love have fallen short around accountability. And I think that is something that I would add, that accountability is a core part of that. And when you do it in the broader space, but you don't do it in your own personal lives, that's where I think we get a bit of tension. And so I guess I would just invite people to reimagine being able to tell the truth about what's happening to you and your communities, and to think deeply about accountability as we do the work of love.
Well, Durryle, this has been really fun in a very powerful way. I mean, it's been fun to see you again and to talk with you again. It's been such a long time, my friend, and I am just so glad that we were finally able to figure out this time to make this happen. So it has been just a joy for me to reconnect with you, and it has been just incredibly thought-provoking. And I guess I'll pull another one of those words out of the Judeo-Christian tradition, which is it's also convicting. You know, as I have to step back and ask myself, how well am I doing the work of love? And what does that look like in my life? And am I being the kind of person that I would like to be when it comes to bringing love into the world in a way that is important and meaningful. So, Durryle, I just want to say thank you for this time. This has been a real joy and a real treat for me. Before we go, I just want you to say a couple things about your consulting work, Love and Justice Consulting. And when we finish up the video and everything, people will have a link to it so that they can go to your website, they can learn more about you and learn how to be in touch with you. But, take a couple of minutes here to sell yourself, if you wish.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a joy and a pleasure. And I am so glad that I met you when I was really young, back in the day, right out of grad school. And you've just been an incredible, kind colleague and friend. And I so just wanted to say thank you for that. And so my consulting company, Love and Justice Consulting, that's where I do learning opportunities for people, mostly leaders, community organizers, activists, educators, who are all interested in deepening their capacity to engage authentically in the work of difference. And in my lens is that in centering love in that way. And so, so there's a conversation that we've had, but there's actually a workshop in a series of workshops that I do around this topic, because at the end of the day, I want folks to not just cognitively know through the discussion, but I want them to feel something while they're doing it too. And so, I believe it is when we can get back together in the world, to be in a small group, interrogating these questions together. Folks might say, I don't want to talk about that with strangers, but yet, whenever I've done it, folks have found pleasure and deep meaning making in that moment. And so there's really specific things that I do there. But I also help with folks through conflict resolution and mediation with a social justice lens on that. And I also help folks think about and conceptualize how do you create stronger, healthier organizations that are more inclusive, that are focused in on issues of racial equity, racial justice, gender justice from an intersectional place. And so I do a little bit of all of those things. It's really been a joy to just kind of show up as supports in this world for people. And, I've had such great, loving people pour into me, and I see my work as an extension of my ability to pour into other people as they navigate life that is complicated within systems that always value them and lift them up. And so you could, of course, look me up on Love and Justice Consulting, or I have such an interesting spelled name. If you look up Durryle, Durryle, you'll find me, because that's what my mama gave me, a gift of a unique name. So I think that captured everything, Tom.
Well, from one guy who does not have a unique name to one who does. Thank you so very, very much, Durryle. It has been a real pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you again in the real world when we can actually be face to face. But thank you for this time. It's been a real gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.